Good morning, guys. Afternoon, evening, whatever your time zone is, wherever you're at, where you be staying. I be staying at the Central Time Zone. So, how are you? Greetings, felicitations, good morning. Let's see who's in the chat today. We've got, I think I saw Critical Cripple, Mr. Shadow Kitty, what's going on? We got Jen's Little Corner, how you doing? Sinister Porpoise, what's up? Who else we got? Titan. Titan, not my anus, your anus, right? Titan, your anus. Is that what you want? Uranus jokes will always be funny. They will always, always be funny. Hey, Jove, what's going on? What's up? Okay, I think, let's see. Streamlabs is with us, as always. Alrighty. Remember Sammy Jenkins. Good day. What's going on? Okay. Oh, so we got a lot of stuff going on. We got a lot of stuff going on in the chat. That's funny. Hello. So, it keeps coming up, particularly with J.K. Rowling and her hot mess, her consistent hot mess of horrible and oppressive views. Eaton is here. Oh gosh. So, J.K. Rowling, she keeps coming up in the news and she keeps saying all these awful things about trans people. TERF's gonna TERF, and they think that's a slur when it stands for trans exclusionary radical feminist. That's what it is. It's like people who say calling them a racist is a slur when they have racist jokes and ideologies and statements, and you're like, that's racist. How dare you call me racist, madam? You're like, what do you want me to call you? Race preferential? I prefer white people to exist. I mean, it's like, oh God, golly, it's just, it's crazy. You don't get to choose who exists and who doesn't exist based on your own personal ideologies. This is literally not how anything works. Hey, Nether, how you doing? Yeah, I don't believe that they're feminists. Yeah, feminism, okay. This is my perspective and what I believe the general consensus on feminism is. It's, you want everybody to have an equal playing field. Everyone, literally everyone. Everyone, every single person that's alive, whatever, drawing breath, existing, doing the best they can in this world. You want them all to have a level playing field. Everyone. That's feminism. Feminism is the idea that men should be able to cry and have feelings, and we shouldn't have any type of oppression on them for expectations on them to do things that aren't part of who they are. Feminism is acceptance of everyone, of who they are. And I think Mr. Rogers was a feminist. I'm just going to throw that out there. Mr. Rogers is a feminist. Mr. Rogers discussed equality. He promoted accepting a person and loving them as they are without trying to force them to change to be something they're not. That's what feminism is. It doesn't mean women are better than men. It means we're all on this planet together, and we need to do the best we can to ensure everybody's got the same chances as everyone else. That, to me, is what feminism is. So, J.K. Rowling is not a feminist. You're right. I agree in that. That was from Jen's Little Corner. Titan says, feminism appropriating radical transphobes. he prefers to call her fart. Equal playing field is also humanism. Yes. But feminism does take the route of discussing the oppressive issues that women face. So yes, I should add that caveat. So you're correct there. That's that's essentially humanism, but feminism does focus on issues that are associated with problems and oppression that women experience. All women. Every person that's a woman. And not all women have vaginas and a uterus, guys. Did you know that? Did you know that? We're going to talk a bit about that today. And not be more than likely to lose children in custody cases because they're men, and acknowledgement that sentencing is often unfair. Well, I mean, yes, exactly, Sinister Porpoise. Men should not lose custody of their children because they're dads. If they lose custody of their children, it should be for substantial reasons, not because they're dads, and kids should be with the mom. Well, that just reinforces the idea that women are supposed to be totally in charge of children. And that even goes down to the whole reproductive rights and body autonomy. If you're going to force women to be in charge of children all the time, why not have reversible vasectomies for all the guys? Make it mandatory. And then when they find somebody who wants to have babies with them, then reverse it, But they don't like to have that conversation because it's ridiculous. And you're right. The whole point is body autonomy. Everybody should have control over their own body. So you're right with that particular perspective. I cry at TV commercials. I have no problem at crying. Actually, I probably have a problem if I cry at commercials. Remember Sammy Jenkins? Oh my goodness. Some of the Hallmark commercials used to make me cry, or the long distance telephone commercials when I was little, and a woman is calling her dad and they're having a meaningful conversation and just burst into tears. That's wrong. Yep. Okay. Catching up on the chat. Alrighty. Yeah, people who don't understand feminism tend to not understand the concept of white privilege either. That's true, Sammy Jenkins. I recognize I have white privilege. My life has been vastly different from a woman, for example, a woman of color or a man of color. And there's differences there. And to not recognize those differences is to completely invalidate the experiences of other people. So while I haven't had the most sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows background growing up practically in poverty, borderline poverty, with a brother and a sister I had to take care of because my mom had a minimum wage job. It was rough, okay, but we held our own, and we were strong. We're strong. But my life is vastly different from that of a woman of color. And I look at the statistics and I look at, their life experiences. So for me to say that there's no differences there is invalidating the experiences of other people, which is wrong. So white privilege is a thing. Male privilege is a thing. Cis privilege is a thing. Being a cis woman, my life is very vastly different from a trans woman, but we're both women. I cry at sci-fi shows. I do at the Wrath of Khan every single time. Wrath of Khan Star Trek makes me cry, Jen. Every single time. I weep like a baby. I mean, I like the first time I saw, not the first time I saw that, but in my teens, when I was watching that again, over and over and over again, I would sit there but maybe I was also, I don't know. I would probably still cry at it too. Maybe I'm a bit different now. I don't know. I haven't watched it in a while. I should see if I can still cry at the Wrath of Khan. I probably can because Leonard Nimoy, oh my God. Still. All right. So what are we talking about today? So I've gone back and I've covered this topic before. But guys, I've shifted my views a little bit. I've shifted my views a little bit. I've shifted my views a teeny bit on this. Not much, mind you. I was heading in the right direction the first time I covered this topic, but there are some things that I feel like we have new science since then and new information that's come out. And, you know, it's important that when you get new information, you shift your perspective. And I'll be honest, my perspective has changed a lot the more that I learn. Does that make me a bad person? No. That's exactly how to adult, right? Just for an example really quickly, before I jump in on this. Many, many moons ago, when I was a much younger adult, I was not fully educated yet. Okay. Wasn't fully educated yet. Didn't quite understand homosexuality. I didn't understand transgender. I didn't understand a lot of those things. This was before we had a whole lot of information available to us. I lived a bit in a bubble. Okay. Growing up in the South, you live in a bubble a little bit. So I wasn't certain on my views on same-sex couples adopting babies. I wasn't certain on that. I wasn't certain if, and at the time, I didn't have any information to see how is it that same-sex couples, does that actually have an effect on the child? Because given a lot of the social issues that individuals who aren't cis hetero face, I was like, I wasn't certain. I'm like, is that going to affect the child? And I was genuinely concerned. Now, that wasn't because I was trying to be bigoted. It was because I legitimately did not know and I did not understand. And so as I learned and as I got the information and I started to listen to other perspectives different from my own and look at all the statistics and the information available to me, I then changed my opinion and I changed my perspective. I accepted the fact that this is a good thing. We should allow same-sex couples to adopt babies. We should allow these sorts of things. So sometimes I encounter people, you know, you've got to, it's a fine line. Are they being willfully bigoted? In the age of information like this, where we have all of this available to us in our smartphones, at the time I didn't have that. So I had to do a lot of foot research on my own, you know, and then when I came to the conclusions, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes sense. So it's hard for me to understand how somebody could genuinely not get it now. You know what I mean? But you can still be in your own bubble on social media even. Just completely ignore dissenting voices or voices that have different perspectives than yours. So it's strange. It's strange to me, but at the same time, you have to be willing to accept evidence different from your own. And I think a lot of that is the mentality of I can't be seen as wrong because wrong means weakness. And we see a lot of that being perpetuated, particularly on the internet and in the current administration. I can't be wrong. Wrong means weak. And I can't have somebody else be smarter than me in immunology and vaccines, like an expert. Oh, I can't have that because then I'm going to look weak. No. So I try to shift perspectives here and say, you know what? I was wrong before. I was wrong with my perspectives. And that's okay. But being willing to accept evidence and even just look at it and listen for a minute. You don't even have to come up with a conclusion or change your mind right then. Just listen, just listen for a minute. Alrighty. Age of information. Hello, V-Roy to Sal. What's going on? Bill Thompson on Facebook. What's up? We got V-Royd. Is it V-Royd Esau? Esau or Esau? If I say your name wrong, I'm very sorry. He's on D-Live. Or they are on D-Live. I don't know your gender. Bill Thompson on Facebook. What's up? Okay. So today I'm talking about how my perspectives have changed a little bit. Because we're getting more information, guys. And that's how it works, right? So, adulting is overrated. It really is. I hate paying bills so much, Sinister Porpoise. I hate that. I don't like grocery shopping. I don't, I'm becoming an old miser in my house with my dog that looks like a Pokemon, Nina over here. Oh, no, it makes you an awesome scientist. Well, thank you, Jen. I try. You are never fully educated. That's true. You are never fully educated. I so want to have this discussion with you, Mel. Maybe we can talk about this if I have a little time at the end of towards the end. You can pop in the Discord, and then we can have at least an audio, and I can pull you in on it if you're keen on that. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about sex versus gender. All right, so the topics that I'm going to kind of cover today, I want to talk about what genetic sex means. I want to talk about how it's not binary. It's bimodal, and there's lots of variation in between the two extremes. I want to talk a little bit about what they call gender dysphoria when it comes to children, and puberty blockers are completely reversible, guys. And if you're curious, I actually did a stream on gender dysphoria in children with Lavender Lady and Brief Brain Facts. She formerly did neuroscience research, and we talked about the different things and talked about the science. And there is an episode of that on This Week in BS. If you're curious about that particular aspect, you can check out that stream if you like. So there you go. Hey, Jenny Morgan. How you doing? All right. So what are we looking at? All right. Misconceptions. I used to have an idea. I used to think that gender is not biological. And so when you talk about biological sex, what does that mean? Well, gender has biological aspects to it. It's not a choice. Genetic sex does not determine your gender. XY and XX, there's all kinds of things that happen between those chromosomes that people don't quite understand. So male is always XY and female is always XX. Well, that's not the case for that, because life finds a way. We all have all kinds of different diversity when it comes to that. We have a whole section called intersex, where things happen that aren't on either end of that spread, I guess. And there are scientists who are pushing to make the idea of sex more of a spectrum. Alrighty. I'm checking out. Happy Saturday. Alrighty, I'm catching up. Okay, awesome. BitChute is not big tech. It's run by two guys, said Esau. Okay. Oh, goodness. I'm catching up on the chat really quickly. I myself go by cis male as shorthand, but my gender identity is really just me. Everyone is an individual, not defined by others. Get to know them if you really want to know who and what they are. True, Nether. That's true. Catching up on the chat. Intersex was at least mentioned in my basic biology education at school, and that was back in the 90s, says Nether. What is on the screen right now is 8th grade biology, essentially. It has a purpose, but it shouldn't be where your biology education ends. Correct, Sinister Porpoise. And so what we're talking about here when you're dealing with genetic sex, you have female, you have intersex, and you have male. Intersex is a whole separate thing where lots of different people exist in the middle. You have female on one side, you have male on one side, and then you got all this in the middle. It's bimodal distribution. It's not binary. There are not two ends and that's it. It's not plus and minus. It's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle. And if you're talking about genetic sex, then you're talking about chromosomal type of sex there. XXXY, then you got XXY, and I'm going to get into some of that here in just a bit. And there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on here. Now, excuse me, I'm drinking my coffee. Now, there are biological factors that affect gender. And we're finding out more about that. It can be formative within the womb, during pregnancies. We're seeing that the environment there can, and the exposure to specific hormones can actually affect the gender identity as well as sexual orientation as the brain is forming. So we do have biological aspects that happen from the mother to the child. So it's not just they're choosing to be this way. No, there are biological things that are happening that happened in the development even of the fetus. So gender, it's identity and expression. It's how you feel you exist and how you feel you should be expressed. Now, when they're talking about sex, reproductive organs, can they make gametes or do they make ovary? Or what kind of gametes do they make? Do they make eggs or do they make sperm? Well, it's not even as simple as that. Sometimes you got all kinds of plumbing going on down there and you don't make either. What are you going to do? Are they just not male or female? What are you going to do if they can't make either one of those gametes or the potential to make those gametes? What if they have both sex organs? What if they have existence of, some testes and they have a little bit of a forming uterus? What do you call that? Do you call that male or do you call that female? Where's the biological sex in that? It's not so simple. So that's what I'm saying. There goes Frodo. He's yelling about something. Pretty certain he's protecting us from the neighborhood cats and squirrels. So good job, Frodo. The cats have yet to attack our house. So it's not, the whole idea that it's just that simple is utterly ridiculous. Okay? We have some social constructs associated with gender where there is a social hierarchy that we see, and we see people are treated differently based on their gender. There are also cultural differences. Some cultures accept various different genders, while others, like America, for example, refuses in many parts to accept that. Oh my goodness, I don't know what my dog is doing, but please do enjoy the fact that I have a dog named Frodo that's protecting us from ninja cats. And we haven't had any pirate attacks here since we've had Frodo. Not like there was any before, but still, Okay. So that's a little bit of what we're talking about. I am intersex. There you go, Jen. I would like to point out that despite what Ben Shapiro says, my college biology textbook never mentioned anything about what pronouns a person should use. Frodo! Hush! He's not going to listen to me. He's the protector of the house. Oh my gosh. Let me see. Okay. My preferred pronouns are it, him, and... See you next Tuesday, Mr. P. How you doing, by the way? What's up? Tubi and 323, what's going on? Let me see who else is here. Oh my gosh. All cats are ninjas. That's true. That's true, they are. But we haven't had any cat attacks. So If you teach individual acceptance but also enlighten self-interest, it isn't destructive at all. This is true. Have you had any orc attacks since getting Frodo? I have not. We have had no Urukai, and we've had no orc attacks. And to be quite honest, the trees have remained planted, so that's also a good positive thing. We haven't had any Ents rise up and start warning us about anything, so that's good. Oh my goodness. Nether says the number of, quote, males with a blind uterus is really much higher than people realize. Yep. Hey, bee family. What's going on? Mel, your dog sounds like he is currently undergoing his own personal gender crisis. Either that or Frodo is having a problem finding his ring. That could be true, too. That could be true. All right. So let's kind of look into the genetic sex factor of this. Okay. So, historically, in what people have done in the past before they learned better, is we have internal and external organs. Those are secondary sex characteristics. I saw something going around on Twitter that they're calling a penis and a vagina secondary sex characteristics. Oh my gosh, what are they going to do now? Well, that's what they're called. They're secondary sex characteristics because that's the phenotypical expression of your genes. Not your Levi's, not your blue jeans. I'm talking about secondary sexual characteristics are your external and internal organs. Ovaries, sperm, not sperm, but testicles, penis, vagina. I'm going to be demonetized. Not because I said penis, but probably because I said vagina. Because that's what YouTube does. Anyway, there's secondary sexual characteristics. And so that's part of helping people, determine male, female, what. But we need to kind of get past all of that. But then you also have genetic chromosomal determination. You can have XX, you can have XY, you can have a single X, you can have two X's and a Y, you can have three X's, you can have an X and two Y's. You can have all kinds of different types of chromosomal determination or chromosomal configurations. And sometimes you can have an inactivated portion on your Y chromosome to where you develop secondary sexual characteristics that present as woman or female or whatever. And sometimes you can have, and I'll get into all of this here in a bit. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I'm about to rant, guys, because people just get this wrong. And I'm really tired of people thinking that gender's not biological. And I used to kind of think it wasn't biological. I'm like, okay, well, gender is something else. And it is something else separate from sex genetics. But the idea that it's not biological when biology influences it quite a bit. Yes, that's right. No orcs have attacked me. This is good, bee family. So, yes, I'm catching up on the chat. We do. We also call the world round and the sky blue. Hello, native atheist. How are you doing? Thought I'd say hi. The problem is complete circumvention of the collective. Individuality can't exist without a common collective. That's true, but that's when we get into the idea of bimodal and spectrum versus one or the other. So it's kind of one of those situations where we got to take into consideration that, there's a lot more to it than just this. Mediocrity's maze, what's going on? Never stop learning and it's never done. If you colloquially, that word's so hard to say, speaking, think you're done, it speaks volumes to what kind of person that you are. Hi, Microraptor. There have been several women with XY chromosomes. Exactly. That's a thing that exists. Alrighty. Catching up. I think I've caught up on the chat. So, it's not so simple as that. So, a lot of people think about this. Biological sex. You have internal and external organs. You have hormones. But it's not binary. you can have variations even of this, okay? You can have variations of this. And the secondary characteristics that develop from the genes don't always work out this way, okay? So much like I said that me as a cis hetero white girl, if I say, oh, people like me, they're not me, so they don't exist. That's invalidating, first of all, evidence to show that they do exist, and also invalidating the fact that those people have a different life experience than me. And it's a life experience, and it includes variations of this. So it's not binary. We don't always grow things like this in this way. And even if we grow things like this in this way, you can still have hormone things going on in the brain, and you can also have a different life experience coupled with varying development in the womb, as well as social interactions. And as you're growing and developing, you can still have a multitude of variables, biological and not biological, that can affect your gender identity. It is not so basic as this. So it doesn't come down to just this, guys. So it's like, if XX is female only and XY is male only, then how do you account for all of this genetic variation? How do you account for all of the different things? What goes on with that? I mean, are they aliens? Did they come from another planet? Were they planted? Are they from QAnon? Or are they like not QAnon? QAnon would think that they were lizard people or something, I would imagine. What's going on with that? Where did they come from? So, yeah, biology is rarely binary, Microraptor. You got that. The reason I'm asexual is because I, like many other, kindly donated my sexuality to Captain Jack Harkness. Ha a Hoovian. Let me get out my sonic screwdriver for you, Sinister Porpoise. There we go. I don't know what I fixed, but check your computer. Maybe I fixed a thing on your computer. What's going on? I love Doctor Who. Maybe I'll get a PhD someday, and then you can trust me, I'm the doctor. I am part-time Lord. I'm part-time Lord. I'm River Song. If ever there was a River Song, she would be me. I feel it sometimes, and sometimes I'm not feeling it. Sometimes I'm like the River Song that wants to hide in the corner and cry, and other times I'm just like, the River Song where she goes, I'm on my way to a bat mitzvah for gay something or other, and I thought, Hitler's a bit garbage. I forget that quote that she said. How about we go and handle the Fuhrer? Oh my goodness. They have brain scans that show trans men's activity coming through as female and vice versa. Well, they do. The brain scans, there have been brain scans to show that people with trans identity have actually developed some structures associated with that identity that they have. So, yeah, I do love me some Doctor Who. Brainius Balky, how are you doing? Yes, trans men scan as male and trans women scan as female. That's exactly true. So it's biology plays a role, guys. We're not going to pretend it doesn't anymore. And the previous video, you can go look at my previous video. I have similar images there, and you can kind of look. And at the time, I didn't, and it was a few years ago. It was a few years ago that I covered this. I was like, I called it biological, and I called gender not biological, and I thought it was exclusively a social construct, kind of, but I knew that there were factors involved, but I wasn't sure yet. But I've changed my perspective a bit more on that, so. Ah. Okay. That's okay. So genetic sex. This is how people, think it happens when you get to the middle school biology. Sperm has an X chromosome. Egg has an X chromosome. Get an XX embryo. Usually they come out female, we would think. But, they develop female parts, we would expect. XY tends to develop male parts. But it does not always happen this way. You can have sperm and eggs that don't actually that are missing gametes. So you can have what we call non-disjunction. This is kind of what that looks like. So non-disjunction is a thing that happens in meiosis when you have gametes that are being produced. So when an egg splits and, it finishes meiosis, you can have one egg that has two X chromosomes, and you can have another one that has just one X chromosome, is what we would expect, standard-wise. In normal meiosis, you would have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome come from the original gamete to form sperm. And then so what you end up is when you have an X hookup with the two X's on that egg, you end up with three X's. Or if you had a Y hookup with those two X's, then you would have XXY. This is a thing that happens. And then you could also have the same thing for non-disjunction in the spermatogenesis. That's the word I was looking for. I'm still drinking my coffee, guys. Where you have one sperm carries an X and a Y, and then you have another sperm that doesn't have anything in it. So this can happen in both sperm producing and egg producing people. And it's common. It's a thing that doesn't just go away. It doesn't just happen the way that we always think it does. And so this is why we say that it's bimodal. It's a bimodal distribution. So this is what we mean here. I can click. Oh, sorry. Woo. So we have what we call a bimodal distribution, where you have super male. I won't even use super. I think that's kind of dumb. We have a male end and we have a female end, and then we have everything in between. If we just say you're either male or female, then we've completely invalidated individuals who exist in between the two. It's not binary. It's bimodal. We have a larger population that fall over on the male presenting, secondary sex characteristics. We have a larger population on the female presenting secondary sexual characteristics. But you have a whole thing in between, right, of individuals who don't fit in those categories. They're not wizards. They're not orcs. They're not, elves. They're not aliens. They're not lizard people. They exist. They're still there. And gender, much like biological sex, has variances. And that's okay. That's okay. Let's see. I'm catching up on the chat. There are no such things as male to female trans woman. I should know I am one. Sinister porpoise. You're not real, man. You're like just a person on the internet somehow. So, Mel, are you saying that I am trans because of my biology? That is what it was determined in my particular allele arrangement, that I was going to be trans all along. I don't know if that's the case, because there are some environmental factors to that, but there are also biological factors to that. Much like Another example, you could have the gene, a particular gene, to develop, let's say, diabetes. Okay, you could have the gene to develop diabetes and never develop diabetes because environmental factors didn't trigger that on. Now, I don't know what your development was like growing up, and I also don't know what your development was like in your fetal development. But we are seeing lots of influence from the, environment of baby, fetus, the fetal environment. And there are some external environmental factors. But, it's hard to say if you're always going to be trans all along. But if you felt that way as you were small, when you were little, more than likely, yes. I would agree with that. So biology plays a role, but it's not exclusively biology. There are also other factors. And that's something that scientists are still learning about. So I don't have all the answers for that there. So I hope that helps, kind of. But it's not something that you've chosen. You didn't choose to be trans. It's just who you are. And that comes from, biology and environmental factors. So, right. Well, the brain thing isn't 100% definitive, Nether. You're right. Some trans people have brain structures more often found in their other gender, but it's not. But that's the point. We can't say it's always this or always that. Then we're trying to get back into that idea of this binary kind of thing when it's not that way. There are multiple factors that can contribute to gender identity, and it's not just solely brain structures look like this, therefore trans. It doesn't really work that way at all. And again, everybody's life experience is different, and it's a multitude of variables that kind of come together. If you just freaking look at human development, okay, there's a running theory right now as to why is it that, or at least there's lots of research that's being done on the development of the brain in it, as far as skull size and brain size. Over every 40,000 years, the brain size nearly doubles in the fossil record. Why though? Why does it double in the fossil record? Why are we seeing this trend? Well, we know it's evolution, but what's going on to make your brain size double every 40,000 years? Well, one thing that they're looking at is the fact that the orbit of the Earth changes every 40,000 years, and where we see this increase in brain size in the fossil record, particularly in the country that it's found in the fossil record, that area would experience extreme climate change, which would require a lot of adaptation. And given the position of the other planets and the gravitational forces affected on that particular thing, they're literally looking at the change of the orbit of the Earth as one of the contributing factors of the brain doubling in size in the fossil record. The changing of the orbit of the Earth, guys. So it's not so cut and dry. We can't just say, this is the definitive thing why the brain size doubled. Well, it's a lot of different things, and they're also looking at the change of the Earth of the orbit of the Earth. So, if you want to learn more about that, check out The Human Universe by Professor Brian Cox. I love him. So, that's the idea. We got to get away from this mentality that it's this way, therefore that's how it is. No, not at all. It's almost like quantum physics, If you think you understand quantum, you don't understand quantum. Oh my goodness. And I'm still catching up. I think with XX people, only one X per cell is active. Yes, Microraptor. What happens is you have gene silencing when you have two X's because there's so much genetic information on an X chromosome versus a Y chromosome that one of those X's do become inactivated. So it's not, if you have like an XXY person, one of those X's do get deactivated, which is helpful, but it still can contribute to certain things that we don't see as binary. All right, I'm still catching up on the chat. See if I can see if there's any other questions. Superman and Superwoman. Well, I mean, maybe. I think intersex people would be pretty super if I'm honest. Because they're pretty cool. To me, all genders can have sexy characteristics, says Microraptor. How does the genotype XYY happen? That's a good question. Let's have a look. Let's look in a bit more. Okay, this is a lot about individuals which are given. What does this mean within a collective context? Well, the collective context needs to be that people are incredibly different, and those differences need to be recognized. And if we understand that there's different variables that can affect the development of a person, that it's not just this and this. Our brains like to organize stuff, okay? Let's just be honest here. Our brains like to organize things. So for instance, when I'm teaching the concept of entropy, and I do that because chemistry professor. So when I'm teaching the concept of entropy, people, their brains want to think there's an increase in organization. Things get organized. They don't think of the increase of chaos. They think of it the other way. Because our brains want things to have patterns. And so the concept of entropy isn't that you have increased organization. You have increased chaos. And a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their brain around this particular concept because of the fact that, and I use like, when we look at states of matter, you look at increase or decrease in entropy, you have to look at, is there increasing organization or decreasing organization? If you're losing organization. But the whole idea is people like to put things into boxes. They like to organize things. And that's a problem, particularly when you consider biology. Because there is nothing about biology. Well, an example, look at the tree of life. How many times are we moving organisms when we find out new information about who they're related to? And that's not bad. And people are like, oh, that's terrible. Well, they thought it was once a part of this family. Now they're moving it over here because they got new information. They weren't necessarily wrong. It just was like, we got more information. Therefore, we know they're a bit more related to this. But that could change. But that doesn't mean it's wrong. People don't like that. And so the idea that we have to have, this is woman, this is man, that's just how it is, woman and man. What does that mean? And there are some people who don't identify as woman or man. And that's normal too. So you have to kind of take this into consideration from that. There are like development factors that take place in the womb that can affect that. But people are social creatures and they like to they want to put things in boxes. Brainiest Balky, what's up? I already said hi to you, but still hi again. Oh my goodness. So are we going to see a decrease in brain size after the climatological disasters caused by unregulated capitalism, further encouraged by the Trump administration? Maybe we'll see brain size increase. I mean, that's what the fossil record says. So us messing up the planet might increase our intelligence. Let's hope. Well, every 40,000 years, maybe in 40,000 years, our brain size will double. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I'm catching up. Doctor Who, yeah. What does the O in XO mean, says Greyheart Labs? Thank you for the question, and hello. It means it's missing a secondary chromosome. It's missing a secondary chromosome. So it doesn't have a Y or an X there. The O means nothing there. It's like when you have O blood type, that means you don't have any proteins expressed on the outside of those red blood cells. That just means the absence of one. Alrighty. I'm catching up. Some people are already asking questions. Answering the questions for me. All right. There we go. Alrighty. Okay, so this kind of brings us to this. Not all men have a penis or XY chromosomes. Not all women have a vagina, uterus, or XX chromosomes. And that's okay. That's normal. We need to normalize that. People like this can exist. Good question, Microraptor. Can a person have only X or only one Y? Okay, the X chromosome has a lot of genetic information on it that's needed for life. So if you had an egg that was fertilized without any X chromosomes by a sperm that had a Y chromosome, that egg would not make it because there's not it's missing substantial genetic code in order for it to continue to function and survive. So it would not be a viable, it wouldn't be a viable fetus. That's right, Senator Porpoise. And the reason, so if you have those two X's that are in, here's something fun for you guys. Here's something fun. So identical twins that are women or ladies or have two X's, we'll say identical twins who have two X chromosomes. One of those X chromosomes will shut down. And so genetically, while they technically have the same genetic code, their phenotypic expression of their genes can be different. You can have identical twins that look slightly different, just look a little bit different. And so it depends on which one of those X chromosomes shut down. We can see that in facial structures. We can see that in eyes, with color blindness. That's another thing. So if they have a normal vision X chromosome and a colorblind vision X chromosome, and the colorblind one shuts down, they can have normal vision. Or if the normal vision one shuts down, they can be colorblind in one eye. It's just because each one of those X chromosomes, and I don't know 100% how it's chosen which X chromosome shuts down and is silenced, but because they both have so much genetic information, they cannot both stay active because it causes chaos. You have too much information there. So one of them has to shut down. So you have to have at least one X chromosome in order for that to work. So here's some examples of what they call sex chromosome disorders. But people are just different. I hate to use the term disorder. How common are men without penises? Well, let's see. We have all kinds of variation. I mean, that's what we would call trans men. Trans men can be men without penises. So here we have various versions. We have triple X syndrome. We have XXXY, maybe a true hermaphrodite. We have Klinefelter syndrome, XXY, male genitals, but with female secondary sex characteristics. So they have a penis, scrotum, and testes are small, and they have enlarged breasts. So even though one of those X chromosomes shuts down, it's still a little bit active. It still can play a role in making the cell susceptible to estrogen. And they tend to be sterile. And so Turner syndrome, that's an X, but no Y is present. It's just an X there. They tend to develop as female external genitals. They don't have substantial ovaries. They don't menstruate, but they still have breast development and hair. They do have some body abnormalities. So you might have some issues with that. You can have mixed gonadal dysgenesis, male or female genitals, or a combination of both. They don't usually have bodily abnormalities, and they may not mature sexually unless there's some treatment involved. And so that's where you can have a mixture of both there. XYY, supernumerary Y, they tend to appear as a normal male, but that extra Y characteristic can cause them to, the extra Y, that addition of the SRY gene, can have them to have over impulsive behaviors. And then you have triple X. Sometimes they're infertile. They look female. And then I had mentioned the hermaphrodite. You have a combination of both ovarian and testicular tissues. They can have a uterus. They can have external genitals that are like masculine with the testicles and the penis, or maybe ambiguous, maybe uncertain. You may not know, or they can have a combination of both. But at puberty, they can still have breast enlargement, and the majority of them still can menstruate. So it's not so cut and dry. You have lots of variations with individuals in that. Now, if we were to just say, oh, well, these people, okay, they might have, gender things going on there. They'll be like, okay, well, I get that, maybe, but we are still all highly susceptible to hormones in fetal development. Even if you have an XX chromosome, or if you have an XY chromosome, you can still be susceptible to varying levels of hormones. Even though that is your genetic thing, you may develop according to the genes that are presented there, and you may not. So, let me see. I need to catch up on the chat before I go much further. Alrighty, let me catch up on the chat. Catching up. You guys are asking some really good questions here and really interesting interaction. The line between the disciplines of biology and sociology is constantly blurred. That's true. It is blurred to a degree. Have you been to a Proud Boys activity? I have not. Now, I have been to a Pride. I have been to London Pride. When I was in London, I got to go to, I was invited to a party at a pub with Miles Jackman, who is an advocate for all kinds of things. He's a friend of mine. He's a lawyer, and he does pro bono work across the board. A lot of the work he does, he's been in the Guardian and stuff. And I was like, "Oh, you're my." I forget that he does stuff, and he invited me. So I've been to London Pride, if you mean Proud Boys in that regard. London Pride was fun. There's also complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. Yes, Porpoise, I'm about to get into that. How common are men born without penises, not ones who undergo surgery? I'm not certain. That's a good question. If somebody has any statistics on that, I can look that up here in a bit. But see, that's the thing. Then we got to kind of figure out how do we know they're men when they're born if they don't have a penis? You know what I mean? How do we know? So I guess we'd have to ask. Okay. Yeah, and a lot of us have not been karyotyped. You're right, Porpoise. Do you think the fact we still use terms like disorder for these conditions is what helps keep the stigma alive? I think so. One of the problems that I have with using the term disorder for sex chromosomes, you're going to have things that stray from what people would consider normal, and you'll have some, you do tend to have some other developmental issues if you have an added chromosome, and that can happen. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen. And so I would rather say sex potential disorders associated with intersex. I would rather say that, because not everybody has developmental issues when they're intersex. And so, yes, to some degree, anytime you throw disorder in there, like gender dysphoria is like, that's a disorder. Well, it's maybe, but particularly when you're dealing with children, if they're still trying to figure out what their gender is, puberty blockers are amazing for that, and it's completely reversible. So you can slow their puberty until you figure out what their sexual identity is. And then once they become adults, then you can start the HRT or something like that to help them develop secondary sexual characteristics that are associated with their gender identity. So I think using the term disorder is a problem. And, when you deal with another example, people on the autism spectrum, they're like, oh, well, there's something wrong with them mentally. No, they're just wired differently. They think differently, and we need people who think differently in lots of different disciplines. And so, making accommodations to say, okay, well, this person who is on the autism spectrum, this doesn't mean there's something wrong with them. It means they just think a little bit differently, which makes it awesome, to be quite honest. Some of our best scientists have been on the spectrum because they can look at a problem and see something completely different than us. What is the word I'm looking for? Neurotypical individuals. That's the word. So there we go. I'm catching up. Yeah, intersex is a much better term. What is the female version of the androgen insensity syndrome? I'm not certain. I don't know what you mean by that, B-family. I'm about to get in what androgen insensitivity is. Let's see. Dysphoria is a kinder word than disorder. That's true. And that's where, really you're just unsure. You're not certain yet. And that's okay. We associate a lot of uncertainty during puberty where you're still trying to figure out your sea legs, I guess you could say. What do I think? How do I feel? Who am I? Why do we associate that and call that a disorder in children who are learning gender identity and what their gender identity is? Yep, puberty blocker is literal. Yep. All it does is make the kid go through puberty a bit later in case they change their mind. Exactly true. Hello, Dinah Cat Loves Me. What's going on? I try to say hi to everybody when you pop in. If I missed you, just let me know. Okay. So, getting into that. Hormonal variations, guys. Androgen insensitivity. This is where your genes, your chromosomes are X and Y, but you develop as a female because your cells lack the receptor to accept testosterone. I don't believe that there's the opposite of that, where the cells don't accept estrogen. And the reason for that is because and I use this as nature's default is developing into a woman. Okay? If you don't have the SRY gene, okay, if you don't have the SRY gene, teeny tiny little gene on that Y chromosome, that little gene says, don't be a woman. It shuts down the process of developing secondary characteristics associated with female. So that's mostly what's on that Y. So if you have cells that don't have the receptor to accept testosterone, it's just floating around in your blood. Your cells aren't going, oh, hey, we need to develop testes. We need to develop a penis. It doesn't happen. So that's why individuals who lack if they just have an X and they lack a Y chromosome, they develop as secondary characteristics associated with a female form. And you can still have testicles that are undescended. You can still have empty scrotal sacs. You can still have female genitals, and you can have a lack of pubic hair. Your body tends to develop as, female. You still get some there's some of your cells will respond to that testosterone, but you'll have lean muscles. You'll be in usually tall stature. So I often say that there are some supermodels that are likely androgen insensitive. They're walking around, and this is something I would teach when I was teaching biology in high school. I'm like, a lot of these people have XY chromosomes. Some of your supermodels that you think are pretty. And then that just completely would flip their mind. They'd be like, oh my gosh, what? I'm like, I know. It's not so simple as that, guys. Let's not pretend it's binary. But that's, one of the things. But nature's default is to develop secondary characteristics of a female that could reproduce that way. But that kind of makes sense because they're the ones who carry the babies, right? So you would want a lot of those, because you only need one sperm to impregnate, somebody, but that's fine. That's just evolutionarily, beneficial for the species. But it doesn't happen that way every single time. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Let me catch up on the chat here. Makes more sense now. Yay, bee family. I'm glad. I think some people use female to always mean XX and male always XY, but I'm not sure how common that is. I mean, a lot of people just consider that. That's what they think male and female is. It's biology, guys. And you're like, no, don't use that phone. I've got a pretty cool article you can check out. Stop using phony science to justify your transphobia. It's not how that works. So let's see. I'm catching up on the chat. Okay. And if I missed any questions, just ask it again just in case. Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar were gay. I don't know. I don't know if they were or not. What do you call a man who identifies as male but would like to be female? I'm not certain. I would guess trans, if they identify as that. I'm not certain. That I don't know that there's a word for that. Maybe they're gender fluid. That could be a thing. Gender fluidity is a thing. Probably gender fluid. That might be a thing. So here we go. Woohoo. Gender, not binary. It does have social construct type of things that we see where people of different genders, there's a hierarchy here. I mean, we just see that, and it's how we identify. It's how we identify as ourselves in our physical expression. I still can't tell if this is a biology stream or a sociology stream. Well, here's the thing. Sex and gender. Anytime you're dealing with environmental factors can be societal interactions. So society can play a role to a degree in gender identity, but it's not exclusively that. So yet you can't just say gender is exclusively based on biology, because it's not. You do have social interactions, whether, societal pressures and societal interactions. You can have different things going on environmentally that can can play a role in gender identity. So to just say that you can't, it's like, well, it's either have sociology or biology, but you can't have both. That's not true. Everything plays a role. The whole nature versus nurture thing. And is it nature? Is it nurture that makes you who you are? It's both. It's both. It's a blend of both. Nature, nurture, all of that. When you look at the behavior of people as they get older, you have individuals who are psychopaths and never hurt anybody. And then you have individuals who are psychopaths and kill people. A lot of that, you have a mixture of nature and nurture there. Now, I'm not calling non-binary people psychopaths. That's not what I mean. But to just sit here and say it's exclusively one thing or another would be false and intellectually dishonest of me. And I try really hard not to be that way. But I understand what you're going at. It's really hard. And again, that's one of those things where we want to put things, this is exclusively sociology and this is exclusively biology, but there's so much overlap. I'm a chemistry professor. Do you know chemistry plays a hand in physics? It plays a hand in biology. It plays a hand in geology. It has a hand in climate science. It has a hand in bioengineering. Chemistry is across the board. So if I just said, well, this is just chemistry, and then I never brought up all of the other things, physics has, plays a role in chemistry. So it's like, you can't just say there's that. And then you have social implications on what things chemists are allowed to study. Society plays a role in the direction of what we research, including our government. And so oftentimes people are like, well, you shouldn't talk about politics, ScientistMel. I thought you were a science person. Well, politics can affect science, the direction of science. It can affect how people respond to science. And it can affect people on a biological level, like a pandemic that we're going through right now. So, let me get this off the screen. So it would be extremely intellectually dishonest for me to just say gender is exclusively biological, because it's not. There are multiple factors that play a role in the gender identity of a person. And that's the whole point of this. We can't just say it's just this and nothing else. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But I appreciate that question. So it's all kind of just, it's not, I'm going to say it's all relative, but there's so many things. So there you go. Let's see. Oh, I don't know which group some of these flags represent. You can Google all of the different gender flags if you like. You can find all kinds of them. Oh, you just meant that they're separate disciplines. Well, I mean, they are, but there's a lot of overlap and depending on what you're talking about. Okay. Hello, Harmonica Man. What's going on? All right. So what we're talking about here. Okay. So we have various genders, and this isn't even all of them. These are just some of them. The more we learn, the more we understand we don't know anything. Right? So gender queer. Okay, in gender, it's okay. So you have gender, all kinds of different ones, and so I'm going to kind of go through these. These are umbrella terms to kind of describe non-normative genders, sex gender expression, gender identities. So genderqueer, that's an umbrella term that describes non-normative genders. So like gender fluid and agender. So that would be like some people might say they're genderqueer. So they kind of float between both gender fluid, and some don't feel like they have a gender. Gender neutral. It's not easily categorized as masculine or feminine, and it can be combos of the two. So gender neutral, you might feel like you're a little bit of both, you know. You don't really have a gender, that's agender. Non-binary is gender outside of male or female. You may not feel male, you may not feel female, and you might be like, you know, your own thing. Androgynous to a bit. Gender fluid, you might fluctuate between the two. You're like, sometimes I feel masculine, sometimes I feel feminine. Transgender, sex does not match your gender as far as your chromosomal sex, your secondary characteristics. That doesn't match your gender identity. That's not how you feel, like who you are. That's not, you just don't feel like you look the way that you think. And then cisgender is sex and gender matches. Sex and gender matches and that kind. People are like, cisgender is a slur. No, it's not. It just means you think and look like how your gender is, your identity. That's all that means. So there's all kinds of different genders. I only hit a few. Lots and lots of genders. And these are the, it's variable. And these are all okay. You don't have to, be male or female. You can be bigender, you can be androgynous, you can be intergender, you can be agender or genderless, you can be a third gender, non-binary, genderqueer, pangender, polygender. And for people who get upset by this, I'm like, it's, what's wrong with this? I don't understand. Is it because people can't, just don't want to accept people that are different from them? Probably. This is how it is. These are these people over here. These are these people over here. There are two things, and that's fine. I think it might also stem from a bit of laziness. You just don't want to think beyond these two things. Makes them uncomfortable. I mean, that would be getting mad. We have pepperoni pizza and we have cheese pizza. There's no other pizza. Any other pizza is just wrong. It's not how God wanted pizza. You're just like, why can't you have variations? We have variations in so many things. What's wrong with variation in gender? I mean, this is how people feel. There are biological factors as well as environmental factors that contribute to a person's gender identity. What's wrong with this? So what? It's okay, guys. People who have different genders are not oppressing you. Unless they're cisgender. It's like, sometimes that's oppressive. Agender is similar to non-binary, yes. Oh, goodness. Jenny Morgan, all I know for sure about gender is that when I was forced to live as a boy, I wanted to kill myself and tried to. And now that I have transitioned, I feel like me that this always is what I should have been. I'm sorry you went through that. Jenny, I'm sorry. Alrighty. There's no set number of gender. That's right. There's not. We have so much variation in our genes, even though we're similar and we have a lot, I think it was like 60 or 70% of your DNA is the same as a banana, because a lot of certain functions are crucial for life and they've just seemed to have worked over time. But as far as identity, gender identity, and expression of that, anything that involves development of the brain or effects on the brain, can be environmental, it can be biological. You have a huge amount of potential there to have so much variation. Let's see. Piano Man is a great song. Piano Man is a great song. I like that song. Somebody mentioned that in the chat. Do 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 do. See, if I start singing Billy Joel, they're gonna copyright strike me or something like that. God only disapproves of pineapple on pizza. I like pineapple on pizza. I think people just wrong. Y'all just wrong. Humans are social creatures who form collectives based on defined norms. Deviations from those norms will be met with hostility. They can be. We get into this tribal mentality, and it used to be whenever we would find our tribe are the people that would protect us and help us find resources, and we take care of our own and for the good of the tribe. But we're finding a lot of things where our tribes are expanding, and they should be expanding, but a lot of people are going the opposite way. And they're saying, this is my tribe. We have male, female, and there's nothing else beyond that. And anybody else is wrong. And then it develops this us versus them mentality. And the idea that we should expand that tribe, I think, is frightening to people because they don't understand it. They're so used to their small little collective, their tiny little bubble. They're like, this is where I feel comfortable because I'm accepted here. What if I'm not accepted in the big tribe? What am I going to do? What if they don't accept me in a bigger tribe? How am I going to survive? And so anytime we see a shift towards expanding that, and there's some psychologists and psychiatrists have been talked quite a bit about this, and anytime we start to see social change, we see an increase in conspiracy theorists. We got that going on right now, guys. Anytime people push for a change in society that does deviate from people in their little tribe bubbles, you start to see this pushback, and it often develops in the form of conspiracy theories. And the more we see that, the more likely, more societal pushback we see where people are coming out and they want change, the more likely we're going to see people going, no, change is bad. We can't do that. I like my little bubble in my house with here where I just don't, and then all of a sudden we got people saying QAnon crap. So, that's anytime we try to, and you're right, so anytime we try to expand that bubble and recognize that there are a lot of people, different people in our tribe, and that's okay, we need to take care of all of them. People are like, no, I can't have a bigger tribe. My tribe has to be like this. Because we can't possibly take care of everyone. There's no way that can happen. And that's our little I'd say, we have our lizard brain and our monkey brain, and we have our rational brain and we got our lizard or monkey brain going, no, we can't do that. We got to take care of our own. We got to do this. But your rational brain, when you allow that monkey lizard brain talking so much, that rational brain gets quieter and quieter. And we're like, well, wait a second. We do have the capability of taking care of our own. We do have the capability of handling these things. It's easy to sort. But that rational side is getting quieter, and that scared monkey lizard brain from the evolutionary basics going, oh gosh, we can't have this. No, what are we going to do? Think of the children. And you're like, they're going to be okay. Listen to the rational side a bit more. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah, they are after a while, people are choosing to be ignorant, Jenny. They are too mentally weak to accept and understand new science. Because that means they're wrong, and wrong is weakness, right? That's what I kind of mentioned that before. The problem is in the rhetoric. We're all either all unique or we're all the same. Well, yeah, that's a problem, rhetoric. We need to recognize we have similarities, but there are things that make us individuals. And again, trying to organize into things. Let's see. Humans have always been tribal apes. That's true, Porpoise. We are tribal people. I'm catching up on the chat. Doo-dah, doo-dah. Okay. Alrighty. So, what is all this? So we have biological sex, we have gender identity, we have gender expression and attribution, and we have sexual orientation. None of these are binary, guys. Not a single one of these are binary. Gender identity is a spectrum, and there's a lot of genders. Biological sex, it's bimodal. You have a whole bunch of intersex individuals that don't fit in either male or female. They're kind of in the middle there. Bimodal distribution. Male and female, larger populations. Okay. Intersex is in the middle. Still, decent sized population. And then you have gender expression. You may not feel like you're either male or female. You may be masculine, you may be feminine, but then there's a whole bunch in between there. Whole bunch of in between there. Androgynous, you don't really feel like either. And so that's okay. Sexual orientation. That's not the same as gender, and it's not the same as your chromosomes. Sexual orientation is your romantic or erotic response. Some people have that, some people don't. Some people are attracted to men, some are attracted to women, and there's a whole bunch in the middle too. None of these are binary. None of them are binary. There's all kinds of variations here. And being willing to accept the fact that science shows that there's all kinds of variations. And gay is completely natural. We have homosexuality in lots of different forms of the animal kingdom. You have a lot of this. It's just not cut and dry. Let's see. Think of the children, Jen. Think of the children. ScientistMel, if there was only two genders or sexes, conservatives wouldn't need to force people into those categories so much. Microraptor. I mean, it's like they want to be, it's funny because a lot of them are like, my individual freedom. Okay, well, what about everybody's individual freedom? No, just mine. And you're like, you're all about individual freedom, but only if it pertains to you and nobody else. How is that individual freedom? I don't understand that. So also, go vote, guys, if you haven't voted already. If you can vote early, that's great. I did yesterday. And then, I wore a mask. It wasn't crowded. I waited till it wasn't crowded. And then I went home, and it was great. Alrighty. So, societal issues associated with that. Non-cisgenders are seen as wrong, Hello, OxPMA. Non-cisgenders are seen as wrong. Non-cisgenders are seen as lesser. There's also non-cisgenders seen as not really a woman or a man, And if they're agender, they're not either, but they're not truly who they are. Often non-cisgenders are misunderstood. They're seen as broken, and it's seen as a choice. Like somebody's choosing to pick that. It's just, I don't know anybody who chooses a gender that's going to cause them to be discriminated against so actively. I don't get it. You are who you are. Nobody chooses a path that would be the hard. Well, some people choose a very hard path, particularly when it comes to learning. But it just your gender identity, who you are, isn't really a choice. Much like people, your brain is there, and you're going to be susceptible to what it tells you. So it's just, you can't just choose to not be who you are. That's not something there. So that's a common thing that kind of makes me Now, the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project deals with a lot of this, depression and anxiety in gender minorities. There's a high level of depression in adolescence. Support is essential. If a teen who is a trans teen or LGBTQ plus teen has a support network, they're likely they have a greater chance of having not so much depression and anxiety. It also saves their lives. Gender identity is understudied. It's getting better about that now. But young people who have support of their family and they have a support network are going to be a lot better off than those who don't. Many anxiety and depression studies in the past, they've left out non-cisgenders. They haven't looked at a whole lot of that, but it's getting better. It is growing in that field. A portion of my store I have Pride merchandise in my store, scientistmel.com/shop. It's I've got a Blocked By series, a bunch of Blocked By merchandise. And it started out to where people who are just really mean on the internet and were mean to me, I would just take their hateful behavior and put it on merchandise and then donate the proceeds to charity. I still do that. And so people who say particularly awful things to me or act poorly towards me or just awful people in general, I do that. So I figured instead of making response videos, I just take their hate, put it on merchandise, make fun of it there, and then donate the funds to charity. I decided to expand that a bit. And even though it's still considered the Blocked By category, I have Pride merchandise where all of the proceeds benefit the Trevor Project. So if you want to have some exclusive Pride designs, and you like that sort of thing, all of those proceeds are donated to the Trevor Project. There's an example from Pride 2019, Science is Non-Binary. Unless it's computers. Unless it's computer. But science overall is not binary. It's not one thing or another. You have lots of sciences. Well, we have lots of different types of people. So do consider donating to the Trevor Project if you haven't already. I like to do that. So what can we do about all this? It's like, what can we do about all of this? Respect people's gender. You can ask what pronouns they prefer. Call them by their chosen name. If they're trans and they've changed their name to associate with their gender identity, call them by their name, not their dead name. People are supposed to be different. It's really important others understand that. If we were all the same, we couldn't be so fantastic in so many different jobs and so many different aspects of life. We need diversity. We need people to have different jobs on this planet. Well, with that, we need biological diversity. We need societal diversity. We need all of those things. We're supposed to be different in order to learn and grow. Different doesn't mean wrong or broken. It's just different. Somebody's different from you. They're not wrong. They're not broken. It's who they are, and that's okay. Allow people to be who they are. Kindness is free. It's absolutely free. It's, maybe it takes people a lot of energy just to sit there and keep their mouth shut and listen, but maybe that's hard for some individuals. Just do that every once in a while. Just sit down, listen, stop talking, just listen. And then if you have questions, and if they're willing to answer your questions, ask them. If they're tired, some people are tired and are just really sick of having to educate others. Go to a science communicator or go to a website like the Trevor Project and do a little bit of reading up on your own. Trans people and non-binary people and non-cis gender people, they're not required to educate you. There's plenty of information on the internet. Have a look if you want to learn more about it. If somebody's willing to answer your questions, fantastic. But don't expect every non-cis person to educate you because they're tired. I know that because they tell me. So, go to a science communicator like myself or go to one of the organizations on a website and learn a bit more. There's nothing wrong with learning a bit more and changing your perspective. It's okay. Let me catch up on the chat really quickly. It's okay, gonna go for it. No worries. You've been busy. You're a little late, but that's all right. Oh my goodness. You guys are funny in the chat. I disagree with your politics, but I can respect your pleasant demeanor. Well, thank you, P. Royd. Esau. Fair enough. That's okay. Fair enough. It's okay to disagree with my politics. Okay. So, kind of what I've talked about today. This sex versus gender, guys. What is it? We've talked about intersex, female, male, hormones, structures, organs. It's bimodal. It's not binary. We've talked about genetics. We've talked about the things that are varying in genetics. We've talked about identity and expression of gender. It's a spectrum. I hate to just use that word over and over again, but it really is. There's lots of cultural differences when we look at this. There's many different cultures. There's cultures that accept many different genders. And there's different genders, lots and lots of different genders. Here's all of my sources, guys. It's a lot of sources. Lots and lots of information. And you can check out Scientific American has quite a few really well done. It's not peer-reviewed journal, mind you, but it's got some really great graphics on people who use phony science to justify transphobia, how we should visualize sex as a spectrum. The World Health Organization has substantial resources for gender and genes and that sort of thing, all of the different things that affect gender, and they keep that pretty well up to date. NIH has articles there, NCBI, NIH. The APA, American Psychology Association, has a whole bunch of definitions on sexuality as well as gender. You can check that out. You guys already know where you can find me. You're watching me now. But I'm also on Twitch, DLive, Facebook, YouTube, my website, ScientistMel.com, Periscope. I have a Patreon, but I've been telling patrons if they have to withdraw support, that's okay. I have a job, a daytime job. I'll still, I have legacy patrons in my patron video. I'll still recognize them for supporting me for so long as they have. Twitter.com/ScientistMel. I have some really cool stuff coming up. I've got my textbook in for the open education resources I'm doing. So I'm going to shill myself. I'm going to plug. I'm getting this together. Chemistry Atoms First. It's from OpenStax. The digital version is free, and it's a chemistry textbook. I will be using this to make General Chemistry 1 and 2 college level, as well as Intro to Chemistry 1 and 2 college level. Introduction to Chemistry is kind of like a primer to help you with the harder general chemistry stuff. So I'll be starting with a bit of that. I might hit Gen Chem 1 and 2 first. I don't know. I have to kind of figure that out. A lot of the stuff is similar, but Gen Chem 1 and 2 gets into heavier math. But I'll be doing open education resources for you guys. I have a really cool trailer. Peter, aka Gonna Go For It, has got that. Let me pull that up. See, this is really bright right here, isn't it? Because that's my huge monitor. It's like NASA. I feel like NASA right now. Let's see. Here we go. So I'm going to show this to you guys. So check this out. Here is Mel's masterclass. So that's Mel's masterclass, and that's going to be part of my open education resources, available, taught by a college chemistry professor for free with cool stuff, graphics like this, content available to you, including digital labs. I'll be incorporating a lot of digital labs that are already readily available on the internet to where you can play around with them and kind of, boost your science education. So whether you're going to a college or not, now you can't get college credit through this, but if you're currently attending a course, or if you just want to learn chemistry without all of the pressures of, oh my God, a test, you can check it out, Mel's Masterclass, Introduction to Chemistry, as well as General Chemistry 1 and 2. It'll be a lot of fun, and I'm excited. I'm excited for that. It's coming up. So let me get. I'm catching up on the chat. Pew Review, how are you doing? A little bit. You missed towards the end of it, but that's all right. We covered a lot of stuff. Still want to chat a bit, Mel. Okay, well, let me pull up my Discord. And I can post a link if you haven't joined my Discord. I can post a link to that. Invite people. So I'll put this in the chat right now. And if you want to hop into the Discord and have a chat with me about gender identity, there's an invite. And I will pull up. I'll be in the voice chat. And I'm there now. So, hey, Jen.
Hey, Mel.
How you doing?
Yeah, good, Lee. Hang on, I've got the other audio going. I'll just mute that. Yeah, not too bad. You did a brilliant job there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you covered everything pretty well, actually.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I was very pleased, I must say. Yeah, as I said in my chat, I am actually intersex, but I think you already knew that. So
I actually didn't know, so I learned something today.
You didn't. I'm a chimera, so I have both XX and XY chromosomes.
Oh, that's so parts cool.
Of my bodies. So yeah, so I was assigned male at birth. So nobody knew at birth, but when I hit puberty, I had changes happen that were sort of both, and weird, and stuff happened and I hid it because you do that, especially in the 80s. Yeah, and it wasn't wasn't diagnosed properly until I was like in my mid-20s. So yeah, I know a fair bit about the intersex stuff, and it's absolutely fascinating. The fact that people can sit there and go, oh no, sex is just straight out binary, just blows my mind. It's like, yeah, just denial intersex people who they are. It's like, oh no, but sex has got to be about the gametes you have or the potential you have for those gametes. And I'm like, well, if you're intersexed and you're at the point where you cannot have the gametes because of your genetic makeup, then how was there ever a potential for that gamete? And in my case, I could have had the potential for both. So, I mean, I don't know because, of course, I transitioned and went as well. So I went through I had all the extraneous bits removed. So I actually don't know if I had the potential for both. But given that I developed both breasts and secondary sexual characteristics of both male and female during puberty, probably quite likely that there was a mix there.
Right.
For me. So yeah. So it's one of those things. If you have the potential for both, then what are you? You're an it. You're an in-betweener. You know. Well, that
you're a magic. You're magic. You're magic. Then that's what that means.
But
you're magic.
That straight out proves that sex itself is bimodal, and there is no arguing with that at all. You know. And,
no.
And you covered that very, very well. And it just boggles my mind, the bigotry. But I mean, when you argue with these bigots, it's just crazy because they go down the whole line of, oh, it's biological sex, so it's what your gametes are. Oh, no, it's not. It's your genetics. Oh, no, it's not. It's this. And yeah, well, aside from if you're doing general biology and you're talking about populations, no one in the medical professional uses biological sex or gametes for defining sex.
Right.
We don't. We use a gamete of all these things, and there's a variation. And then they go, oh, but you can't change your sex. Well, if one of those sex characteristics is phenotypical sex, which is your secondary sexual characteristics, and trans people do change those.
Yes.
To the most possible extent that's possible in medicine. So, from a general perspective, and how everybody would look at somebody and define sex, for most trans people, they have changed their sex from the way that you would most commonly determine sex, which is phenotypical sex. I mean, let's face it, that's how we assign sex at birth. Doctor picks up the baby, looks between the legs, and go, oh boy, oh girl, and that's phenotypical sex. It's got nothing to do with gonads or chromosomes or anything. So
right.
It's just it's trying to use 1960s textbooks to promote your own bigotry, basically.
Yeah, it's really kind of gross too. I just in the whole idea of gender reveal parties, I hate those. I hate those so much, and they start forest fires in America, and I'm like, why are you? Well, who cares? What just have a baby.
Yeah, and what does it matter? I mean, as an intersex person, I'm widely aware. I mean, it didn't happen to me, but I'm widely aware of the fact that if your genitalia is ambiguous as a baby, a doctor, and well, mostly the doctor, not the parents, is going to decide what gender you're going to be. And 9 times out of 10, they will assign female because, as the doctors who do it crassly put, it's easier to dig a hole than build a pole. And
right.
That's fundamentally wrong. I'm aware that there's a few states in the US that have now, or a few hospitals in the US that were doing sex on intersex children who have now said, unless, of course, it's medically necessary for the survival of the child, we will not perform these surgeries.
Right.
If you are a parent of an intersex child, you have to, and you want surgeries, you're going to have to go somewhere else because we won't do it. We're going to wait until the child is old enough to identify their gender. Because that's what we do. I mean, anyone who says, oh, I don't have a gender, I'm just the sex I was born, well, that happens to be your gender. Everyone has a gender.
Yeah.
Everyone has a sex, and sex can be, to a large extent, not all aspects of sex, but a large extent, sex can be changed. And we should respect all of that in people because that's being a good person. Respecting other people and who they are is what we should strive for as a society.
Yeah, I just, it's probably the most common meme that I've seen going around that I feel like is what I'm constantly having to do and have been doing since 2016 is I don't know how to explain to you that you should care about other people.
Exactly.
It's
exactly.
like,
and And I realize some of these people are arguing, and it is people who say, "Oh, it's not transphobia." It truly is transphobia, because the concept where a lot of these people who, not necessarily TERFs, but a lot of people who have issues against trans people, it is about fear, exactly about fear. It's afraid that the trans person is going to be in your bathroom. It's like gays in the bathroom. It's exactly the same thing,
Right.
and it's even in sport. It's the fear of the trans woman on the field who might hurt the less capable cis woman, which is a load of malarkey in 99% of the cases. I won't say that there aren't some trans people who got a huge advantage, especially if you transition later in life and you were an athlete before and you stayed an athlete, and you worked out and built up lots of muscle. Then yeah, maybe you do have an advantage. We don't have the evidence to back that up.
And so do androgen insensitive people. I mean, androgen insensitive people have an advantage because of the fact that they're able to respond to testosterone a little bit. Not a heavy amount, but they still develop as women. And so nobody's going around looking at their chromosomes going, "Are you androgen insensitive?" I mean, it's just
it's crazy, isn't it?
It
and
is.
Going back to androgen insensitivity, we said there probably wasn't because females the default. It's called estrogen insensitivity syndrome, which kind of makes sense. There's only ever been 5 reported cases of it, and two of them were cis men and 3 of them were cis women, and 2 of the cis women were twins.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
I hadn't even heard of that, so that's new.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
It's very, very, very rare. They actually think there's cases of androgen insensitivity syndrome in XX women as well. But you wouldn't notice it because they just wouldn't respond to any testosterone in their system, but they still respond to the estrogen. So you wouldn't see it. But with the estrogen insensitivity in the women, of course, that they don't develop secondary sexual characteristics. There are different levels of it, though. I believe with the twins, they would respond to a certain amount of estrogen, but not all of it. So they could, but there was one woman who responded to nothing. They ended up having to put her on progesterone and something else to solve problems that she had with ovarian cysts and things like that.
Oh yeah,
because she couldn't respond to the estrogen. So she basically stayed undeveloped, which is not a good way to be over a prolonged period of time, because we kind of need to have that development at some point.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting. But the fact that the people who suffered from it were male, and they had a negative effect on them too because they didn't respond to estrogen as well. So this thing of what hormones are male and what hormones are female is yes, estrogen is predominantly female hormone, but men have it too. And testosterone is a predominantly male hormone, and women have that as well. And female athletes have an increased level of testosterone because of them being athletes.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So it's a lot of misunderstanding at the biological level in all the areas where you get that prejudice against trans and non-binary people.
Yeah.
And most of it's ignorance and fear.
That's true. I mean, that's why they call it transphobia, as you said.
Phobia. Yeah. I mean, some of it is plain outright bigotry. There is definitely an element of bigotry where you've got people who, from a religious background, they're not fearing trans people. They just don't want them to exist.
Right.
And that comes from just a place of bigotry and not necessarily transphobia.
By the way, Chick-fil-A is one of those organizations that don't want anybody outside of that to exist.
So they don't want trans people. They don't want gay people.
I know how to make their chicken, guys. I know how to make their chicken, so you don't ever have to eat there again. You can just ask me.
Awesome.
I actually used to work there.
Cooking lesson.
I did work
cooking
there.
show.
Oh yeah, God, that'd be great. I worked there in high school, but I didn't know anything about that. I worked there 2 years, and I know how they make their chicken, guys. It's just stick your chicken breasts in pickle juice like overnight. That's how they season it, and then fry it in peanut oil. You just use a standard flour coating, deep fried in peanut oil. Tastes the freaking same. It really does. Or you can grill it on your grill.
Oh wow.
Tastes the same. They just brine it in pickle juice. Oh, that's what makes it.
That's so cool.
It's good. It's really good. I actually save my pickle juice and I'll like take frozen chicken breast and throw it in there and let it thaw in the brine in my fridge. And I'll
Oh,
just grill it
now I
like
want to
that.
try it.
It's
I've
good.
never had Chick-fil-A because of being Australian, so now I want to try it.
Yes. Local Chick-fil-A restaurants may not agree with the chain's policies. That's true. They may be franchises, but still, I avoided it. I just avoid them. I don't go there because,
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Uh,
I just can't do it.
Aren't they a little like people attached to AIG that they kind of have to sign agreements to the faith when they sign up to create the chains?
I don't know about that. I didn't have to do that as a worker, but
No, but I
I
wouldn't have
don't
thought
know.
workers would, but I think the people who buy the chains do. So
Right, they might. I'm not certain. But
yeah.
but if you want to know how to make their chicken, man, just hit me up. It's not that bad.
Mm.
Similar to Hobby Lobby, yeah, I avoid Hobby Lobby too. And
Yeah.
ironically, they actually get involved in black market art that was taken from like Jewish people so during World War
Oh
II.
yeah.
They're horrible. I mean, so this idea that a religious based organization is somehow not corrupt because of that, and you're like, no, take a look at some of the stuff that the CEOs and the families do that are associated with those organizations. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Thomas Paine.
I mean,
Trans women are not female. What are you talking about? And are born without a uterus. Rare. They have many other features that are female and thus are female. I don't. I don't understand what you're
yeah.
saying there, Thomas Paine.
Sorry, Thomas. You're stuck in this. As we said earlier, you're stuck in the '60s with this. Um, Biology and medical science has moved on from these strict boxes that we shove people into.
Yeah.
We actually understand a lot more about it now. Um, it's not just a case of are they female or not. It's a
Yeah.
case that these terms are being applied in a way that, whilst maybe handy in the past for our scientific notation, don't respond to the way that we'd address people as people. So when you're talking female in the sense of discussing biology, yeah, female is assigned to the term assigned to somebody who has an animal, not necessarily a human, an animal that produces the gamete that's associated with being female. And it's not necessarily the largest gamete because it depends entirely on the species of animal you're looking at, because different things for different species. But for mammals, it's generally the large gamete. But as far as it goes in anything else, you have the legal sex of somebody. You have the sex. You have the sex that is your phenotypical sex. You have the chromosomal sex. You have all these other things that apply to that. And as part of that, the legal sex of somebody applies to them the title of female. So if
Right.
somebody is legally assigned as female, they're a female, regardless of what you think the science is or isn't. That's who they are. Respect that. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah. Well, goodness. I mean, and Thomas, if you're curious, you can go back and have a look at the stream earlier. I cover a lot of the science associated with that. So you can check that out. Hi, Microraptor. You've hopped in to the Discord chat. What's going on?
There was no ad homs in what I'd said, Thomas.
Yeah, there's no ad homs there. Oh,
And
goodness.
there's no ad homs in this stream. It's all the science that is accepted now. Just accept that science has moved on from what you learned. And that's a good thing because science changes. If science stopped changing, we'd be stuck in the freaking dark ages. That's
Yeah.
the whole point. We figure out that things have changed and
Yeah.
we move with it. Well, not so much change, but as we learn more, science adapts to the new things that we've learned.
Goodness. So,
Hello. I had muted myself. I forgot that I had pushed the door. So,
That's okay.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't really have any questions. I was just here because I'm a trans woman and I thought maybe I could join in on the conversation.
Absolutely. Do you have
Hey,
anything?
Microraptor, how are you, hon?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Tired, because it's like 1 a.m. here, but that's okay. Had to
Okay.
stay up for this one.
Mm,
I
yeah.
appreciate you staying up for it. Well, if anybody in the chat has any questions for Jen, are you open for questions from people in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure. A lot of the people in the chat know me and probably know most of it anyway, but yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm open for questions.
If
I'm sure
anybody has any
Microraptor is too.
questions, I'll probably wrap this up in about 12 minutes or so. Then it would be like a 2 hour and 15-minute stream because I don't want to hold anybody much longer than that. But I want to give people an opportunity to ask questions if they have any. For Jen, I don't know that Microraptor is up for questions. She hasn't said.
Yeah, they can ask questions to me. That's okay.
Okay. Alrighty. So, to kind of just talk a bit, we've been talking about, well, I've been before talking about all of the science associated with sex versus gender, the variations associated with that. If you're curious, I have a couple of easy to read articles I can pull up here from Scientific American. It's called, I'll put this in the chat. And this is essentially stop using phony science to justify your transphobia from Scientific American.
Oh, I saw that article. It only came out in the last couple of days, didn't it?
I think so. Let's see.
Yes, yeah.
Oh no, June 13th, 2019.
June the 13th.
Yeah.
Also, it's from last year.
So it's from last year. So that's one you can look at. And so they go through a lot of biological sex, how you get it. So they talk a lot about that. So if you don't want to sit through my live stream again, that's okay. You can talk, it talks a bit about the body, brain, hormones, and all of the things that are involved with that, science and society, a bit of that as well. And I can put that in Discord here. In the general chat if you want to have a look at that. Another one. I thought I had another one. Visualizing science as a spectrum. Another really good one. Sex as a spectrum. This is a good resource as well.
One thing I think of is that whenever someone says that XX is always woman and XY is always a man, it's like, how the hell do you know what chromosome people have? Like, I happen to be pretty sure that I'm an XY person because I have a genetic thing. So if I was anything else, people would probably have told me. But most people you meet, you don't know what chromosomes they have.
No. No, you don't.
The majority of people don't know what their chromosomes are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Thomas is on a bit of a thing. Yeah, I know you're going to list people like Emma Hilton and Colin Wright and people like that. Yeah, you are aware, Thomas, that most biologists don't agree with those particular people. They are a minority in the field. These days, that side might have been the majority once, but it isn't anymore. And as I said, science moves on, and it will continue to move on because we have greater understandings about this. And it's not just that it's not that sex is unimportant or anything like that. It's the fact that it's more complicated than just I'm doing hand actions and no one can see me. It's that biological sex, as is used in biology generally, is a diminutive definition that serves a particular purpose within biology. But in the greater scheme of things, especially when we're talking about humans in a medical setting, it is not enough to define who a person is just with biological sex. Yes, I know it's about gametes, and that is irrelevant to the rest of the discussion, because sex is more than just gametes. We don't even assign. We don't get out a syringe, suck out someone's gametes at birth from a baby, shove it under a microscope, and figure out what they are. We take a look between their legs and go, boy or girl, or maybe intersex because they haven't got fully formed either way. So we use phenotypical sex, the phenotype sex, in general to define the sex of an individual, and that's the sex that goes on somebody's birth certificate. That's the point, Thomas. We don't care about gametes in the general sense of talking about people. We don't give a right royal shit about gametes. Sorry, Mel.
Oh, it's okay. I mean,
because they're not that important, apart from if you want to breed, and that's all it is. As far as defining sex especially within human beings, there's way more important things than that.
Just to base exclusively the genders, or where they're mixing gender and sex. First of all, that's wrong. They're two completely different things.
Gender was invented before we even knew what gametes was.
And then you have people who can't produce sperm and eggs, and so what are you going to do with that? It's just what about the people who are sterile and they can't produce either gamete? I think Thomas is reducing in the chat here, reducing everything to what's your ability to have a baby, and it's not cut and dry like that. And the point is, it's to say it's one thing or another is intellectually dishonest. As I had mentioned, if it's exclusively that, it's grossly intellectually just dishonest. I'm Gen X too, Thomas Paine, and I have two postgrad degrees, and I teach chemistry on a collegiate level. So that doesn't mean anything. Your inability to accept new evidence has nothing to do with your education. So, and it's not ad homs to say that a particular perspective is outdated and incorrect, particularly when we have new information to suggest otherwise. And that just because science shifts, just because science is shifting to a greater understanding, it's like atomic theory, okay? We learned better, and we got better at the model. We need to do the same thing with what we coin as biological sex. We need to do the same thing with that. We have more information, so we need to adjust the model, just like atomic theory, just like evolution, just like literally everything else in science. Gender and sex doesn't get a pass on that.
Yeah, and if we stuck in the original science of anything, we'd still be using Newtonian physics to describe gravity.
Yeah, we do to an extent, don't we? But I mean, we have expanded.
We do, but we've moved on from that because what it is, and I've had this argument with somebody who claimed to be a physicist. Newtonian physics Newtonian gravitational mechanics are not wrong. They're not complete. They're not the whole picture. Okay. And we have the same problem with we possibly have the same problem. We don't know for sure with relativity, with general relativity. We from most of the observations we can make, general relativity looks true and accurate. But we have cosmological problems which we try to solve with things like dark energy and dark matter, which we still don't know even exist. If they don't exist, then we have to go back to the drawing boards. But that doesn't throw general relativity out. It's still right up to a certain point. We just have to figure out where the errors are to make something that's more complete. And that's how science works. So it's not that things like biological sex and gametes are wrong. None of us are saying that. It's just that biology has moved on to accept that there are more factors involved in determining sex than just someone's gametes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the statement that Thomas in the chat said. He said someone born with half an arm does not claim arms are on a spectrum. I don't quite.
It's a common argument to say that just because somebody doesn't have gametes doesn't mean that there's a spectrum of sex. The point that he's missing is gametes are not the be all and end all of defining what sex is.
And not everyone
And
has
that's
the
the bit you're missing,
arms.
Thomas.
Oh gosh.
And not everyone has the exact same arms.
I
Some
know.
has a bit longer, some has a bit broader.
Yeah, and then you also have people who are born without an arm, they can still get another arm and attach it to them that works, as a bioengineering
Which just
kind of
goes
thing.
to show that the types of arms that people have and numbers that they have are on a spectrum.
Yeah.
Just like sex is on a spectrum.
It's almost like a self-defeating argument there.
It is.
So I just, when people throw stuff at that, like, this is why I don't really argue with people who don't accept evidence, because they just throw stuff at me and I'm like, well, are you saying that feels like a straw man? What in the heck are you talking about? Arms are not this, arms have, yes, we have definitive things that make an arm. And then we actually replicate that in a lab to give a person an arm that doesn't have an arm to help them, feel more complete. You know what I mean? So they still, there's even people who lose an arm. They still feel like they have that extra arm there, even though it's gone. And so it's like, it's a self-defeating argument. It's kind of weird. I don't quite get that.
It's this want to put people in boxes to say that this is a particular way and defend the status quo. And this happens in science all the time. I mean, it took a long time for science to accept general relativity.
Yes.
and this is the point we're at with it. Most biologists and organizations now accept that gender is a spectrum, that it's more to it. Not gender. They all accept gender as a spectrum. Most accept sex is also a spectrum, and there's more to it than just gametes. But it's not whilst it's the majority view now, it's not the consensus. They don't all agree on that. Yeah. And you can find biologists who still think that this is wrong and we shouldn't change and we should keep things the way they are, because people don't like change.
No, they don't. I mean,
and
I'm
curious why Thomas is coming in here and just not wanting to learn. He thinks that he is correct and he won't accept the idea that he might be wrong.
Because we already discussed that wrong means weakness. And so, but that's like the polar opposite of what science is. If you think you're never wrong, then you don't do science right. I just,
exactly.
Science is. Oh, sorry. Hi, Senator Porpoise.
Now he's going down. Now he's going down the sports side of things, because often this is where this goes, because they don't want to change these definitions because that will affect sport in the long term. Well, sport will be affected in the long term because, in all honesty, inclusion is way more important in the long run, and ways of making inclusion work is what we have to aim for.
I think we should just have both. Yeah, we should have all genders in a sport together. I don't understand why we have to have men's basketball and women's basketball. I think we need a mixture.
If you found the ways for each sport that were better, because sex is just the easy trope we use now to separate sports.
Yeah.
I've heard arguments like, but in fighting sports, we can't have the men with the women because of the strength. Hang on, this is why you have weight and strength categories in fighting sports.
Yeah,
exactly.
And if you only have the people who are of the same build type, and you'll have to have a bit of a shift in that. Fighting each other, it doesn't matter if you have men and women fight, because ultimately, after you even that out mostly, it comes down to skill.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't come down to that. And that's the thing. Inherently, sports are not fair
No, they're not. Who
we
developed the
don't
female leagues? It wasn't, it was the dudes who were like, well, we need a separate group for those
that's
ladies.
true. But the feminists who argue about it now have forgotten the fact that women's sports weren't made for the sake of women. It was made for the sake of fragile men egos who didn't want women to beat them.
I mean, I
would just like to.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Sinister Porpoise. Sorry.
I know I'm bad about interrupting. This is why I don't have people on my streams generally.
Hi, Sinister Porpoise.
I'd like to make a point that Thomas Paine seems to be missing. Saying your science is outdated is not an ad hominem. Saying you're wrong because you're an idiot is an ad hominem. The ad hominem has to do with why you're wrong, not that you're wrong.
Yeah.
You can insult someone.
Yeah, I don't know what he thinks is an ad hominem.
Yeah. I mean, I've been wrong before. And then I say, you know what, I was wrong. But I'm not stupid. I know I'm not stupid. I can be wrong and be intelligent. And that's fine. Like before about the androgen insensitivity, and then Jen's like, hey, there's a thing that's like this. I'm like, oh, wow, that's so cool. I didn't know that. I didn't go, how dare you, Jen? You come on my stream and correct me? What's wrong with you? It's just like,
I didn't correct you. We were both wrong. I said exactly what you said in the chat, that, it shouldn't be like that because female is the default. I honestly didn't think there was such a thing as estrogen insensitivity syndrome until I looked it up. And I was like, oh, wow, there is.
And see, that's cool. And so I'm just like,
It's great. I love learning. It's why I do my stream that I did earlier, where I say I do the Stump Gen streams, where I have people in the chat ask me questions with the idea that they ask me something that I cannot answer.
Right.
Because I learn something. If they ask me something I can't answer, and it's a fair science or whatever question, then I will learn something. They can give me the answer, or I'm going to have to look it up later. And that is brilliant. I think when we are challenged, we are having to accept and come to understand new ideas, that's when we grow as individuals. If we just stick to the past and don't look at and try to understand new ideas that are coming up, I mean, even if those new ideas end up being wrong,
right?
But if we don't try to do this, we get stuck in the past. And science has done this before.
Yes, it has. And I think
we've been stuck in the past, and you could end up with 100 years of no development because mostly it's happened because of religious reasons, because religious dogma didn't want things to change.
Right.
But
I mean, you
look at happen again.
You look at all the issues. I mean, that's one thing that I bring up, particularly when we're dealing with the current climate of inequality in the U.S. Where I work, 70% of our population is poverty line. And a lot of these individuals are minority groups. And so it would be wrong for me to just sit and be quiet about the inequality that we see in science. We see it in gatekeeping. We see it in all kinds of different things. Yeah. And so then rather than just pretend it doesn't exist and say, okay, I am going to completely invalidate all the experiences of all these people who have, these different things going on in the form of protests. And we see lots of things, happening. And it's good that we're having these conversations. I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to talk about the times where science, where they didn't listen to people of color or women or anybody else. If they did, they took their research or they stole their ideas, or, like we have black women are responsible for programming the computers of NASA. Okay. But they weren't allowed to have the same bathroom as the white women. And so if we could think, what if we had been inclusive from the beginning? How further along would we be right now? And that's often what I kind of bring up when I'm lecturing, or I talk about things, or I talk about, you have to talk about current issues and how it's relevant to the discipline of science. Because I have students who don't know when they're going to eat next. I have students who lost their jobs because of the pandemic. I have to be a professor that accepts the situation and the circumstances if I'm going to do my job correctly. So I can't just, ignore, oh, you're a trans person, I'm just going to call you whatever I want to call you and negate your, invalidate your whole life experience and hope you learn chemistry from me. If not, who cares? How is that going to, how am I doing my job that way? So I can't do that. So as a scientist, a chemistry professor, and a person who works with marginalized groups on a regular basis, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, by the way, I'm just going to use this outdated science and completely throw out your life experience and just say, oh, well, I'm going to pull some Jordan Petersons and Stefan Molyneux crap about IQ and race and just throw that at you. I'm not going to, that's just, it's counterproductive to science. It's counterproductive to our progress. And it makes me not only a terrible person, but how is anybody going to learn chemistry from me in that? I'm like, you can't do that. So it makes me kind of nuts when I see, and I've experienced marginalization and gatekeeping from white males at various institutions.
Oh, wow.
When the behavior that they had, I was told science is hard and you're a girl, you should be a teacher, by somebody I did undergraduate research with for a year. And he was on the graduate board of the college that I was at. I'm like, and he would not write me a letter of recommendation unless I promised to be a teacher. What am I going to do? And so that's where I was at. I didn't have any other options. And so I took the options that I could until I could get to where I wanted to be, which took a long frickin' time. So I had to jump through a lot of hoops. And so I bring this up. I often bring this up to my students. Even I don't say who that professor is because it's a he said, she said thing. And the last thing I need to do is blacklist myself. But I go through and I bring that up to my students saying, we got a long way to go, but I'm going to help you in the best way that I can. So at least there's something there. So it's just, anytime I shift my perspective all the time with new information, and that's important too. And it's okay to be wrong. And that's another thing. We gotta do better, guys. This makes me nuts.
And that's the important thing about being in science. We go where the evidence takes us. And if we have new evidence and the science moves, we have to follow that. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to call yourself a scientist in some field or you're in biology and you're just sitting and ignoring the new stuff because I don't want my things to change, then you're not being a good scientist. You're basically being an asshole just for the sake of it. And not following the scientific method at all. Right.
I don't know if I said hi to Jev in the chat. If I can't remember. I know I saw her earlier, but I don't know if I said hi.
I love Sinister Porpoise. Being wrong sucks, but you shouldn't be afraid to be wrong. And that's my philosophy on everything. I like being wrong because being wrong is one of the ways we learn.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong, please tell me, because I don't want to continue to be wrong. I want to be right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And I had a thought we did. I'm sure that people had this kind of conversation with women being scientists and with black people being in sports and white people and black people being scientists and like everything else before us. Like, I don't think this conversation is new, but I think the group is new. Trans people as a group is new, but the conversation itself is probably old.
Yeah. But we still need to talk about it when it pops up, and
we do.
In everything in science.
Yeah.
Not just about this.
Right.
I get very frustrated with people who won't move with the new evidence.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence is there, follow it. If it turns out to be wrong, that's fine, but that's why we look into it. It's why we explore these things. It's why we move forward in science and in the social things that are attached to that new science. And we have to do that. Or we stagnate and we don't get better as a society. We don't get better at the science. And we're not going to get anywhere in the long run if we don't embrace what's new.
Bill Thompson on Facebook said, check out Liam Kofi Bright's video on why scientists lie. I have to check that out. And here's the thing that I always found pretty interesting. If politicians were held to the same standards of scientists, if they lie, their career's ruined. So it's like, if they're caught, usually Usually, most of the time, their career's ruined. And if they lied on their data and they got any kind of government funding, that's fraud. And so they go to jail for that. So it's like, but politicians can lie all the time because it's free speech in that regard. But if scientists were to do that, I really wish we could hold politicians to the same standard. It would be great.
Unfortunately, we do get some of that for some scientists where they will adjust the p-values in their research so they can try and get something like a result that they wanted.
Yeah.
And it's why we have peer review.
Right.
But there are times when peer review does fail.
Yes.
And especially that this is one of the biggest problems we have in research that revolves around trans people, especially because generally these studies are done on very small groups because trans people is a very small group. The ability to do follow-up research to confirm or tear down a hypothesis that comes out of one of these studies is very limited. And often the studies themselves are driven by the ideology of the people behind them. For example, the two main studies that have been done that are often addressed for trans women in sports are and I'm not going to remember the names of the people who did them. One was done by a trans woman, and it had to do with sprinters and level of advantage, especially to do with oxygen in the blood, etc. Which her studies was done with athletes, amateur athletes, but they were athletes nonetheless. And that studied about 30 trans women who were athletes, and it showed no net advantage for running and that type of sports.
Right.
But that's still a very, very, very low sample.
It is. And, the only way that we can do more...
Rightly, people realize that. Sorry. No?
Oh, I was just going to say, the only way that we can do more research is if we're inclusive.
I totally agree. And the other study is the one that's done in Sweden, where they were studying trans people who just started transition to see the changes in muscle and other atrophies. But to study the muscles, they studied one muscle, the thigh muscle, and they studied it in flex. So how much pressure the muscle would have during flex. They studied 12 trans women over a 12-month period on hormones. And what they showed was there was a less than 5% change in the muscle for those 12 people. But not only was the sample really small, they didn't keep track of how the exercise of those women changed over that 12-month period. And starting hormones will generally encourage trans women to put on weight. So you'll often do more exercise to stop themselves putting on weight. So you will maintain muscle or grow muscle because you're exercising.
Right.
So if you're not allowing for that, how do you know that the results you got from the study are accurate?
I know.
And the other thing about it was the fact that the particular muscle and the technique that they studied with the muscle was one that actually, according to sports scientists, should be one that wouldn't have expected any change, because you wouldn't expect a lot of change in that over that time frame.
Right.
So it wasn't. It was a pointer to something, but not definitive. And yet that was the study that rugby, the World Rugby Association used to exclude trans women from rugby. Right.
It's I want to just put my head through the wall.
And it was the politics of it. So that comes down to the politics of it and the people involved with the studies and things like that.
It does.
But as you getting back to what you said about you'll only get to know what the results are of that with inclusion is exactly my point about it. You will, the easiest way to find out if there's an advantage for trans women is to let trans women compete.
Exactly.
And study the statistics.
That's exactly correct.
The statistics will tell it all. And at the moment, the statistics say that trans women don't do very well in international sports.
All right.
Yes, you'll find the ones that the press pull out when there actually are the occasional wins. But trans women are up to 0.5% of the population. You would expect 0.5% of medals in the Olympics over the last 17 years to have gone to trans women. No trans women have ever qualified for the Olympics.
Well,
none.
I gotta wrap this up because we're at 2.5 hours of the street. So I'm gonna drop off a Discord. But thanks for joining Micro Raptor, and thanks again, Jen's Little Corner.
No worries.
It was good to see you guys.
Thanks for
Well,
having
see, talk with you. And thanks for joining on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. So many windows open I have so many windows open on my computer. But that was awesome. Be certain to check out Jen's little corner. She's on Twitter. Microraptor is often in the side chat here. So special thanks to them for hopping in and sharing their insights on this particular topic of sex versus gender. So I'm going to read Mr. Rogers, and then I'm going to sign off, guys. All right, so this is The Courage to Be Yourself from The World According to Mr. Rogers. When I was a boy, I used to think that strong meant having big muscles, great physical power, but the longer I live, the more I realize that real strength has much more to do with what is not seen. Real strength has to do with helping others. So what is a boy? What is a man? What is strength? Well, Mr. Rogers says, when I was a boy, I used to think that strong meant having big muscles, great physical power, but the longer I live, the more I realize that real strength has much more to do with what is not seen. Real strength has to do with helping others. So, do one nice thing for somebody today. Sometimes helping can just say, hey, I was just thinking about you. I hope you're having a great day. Sometimes it's, that looks like just a nice thing. I was thinking about you and that time that you did this thing. Sometimes just letting people know that you were thinking about them is a way to help other people. Because that little thing can matter a lot. You never know. But, there we go. I got a super chat from Microraptor. You're awesome. Well, thank you so much for that super chat. The alert box didn't pop up. But there you go. Thank you for that super chat, Microraptor. I appreciate it. My alert box isn't working. There you go. But yeah, do check out The World According to Mr. Rogers. I love Mr. Rogers. There it is. Thank you so much, Microraptor. There we go. And ScientistMel, would you do the 12-year-old and me the favor and only adding that one more point? Just what else? 8008. Oh my goodness. Ah, that's funny. Helping each other is the best. It's how you make friends. Exactly true. And do keep an eye out for, I think I might be streaming tomorrow with Mero for This Week in BS. I'm not 100%. I have to catch up on some work. But do be checking out for my open education resources. OpenStax.com. You can get the chemistry book there. It's like 40 or 50 bucks in print through them if you want to get a hard copy. I will be going through this monster of a textbook for introductory chemistry, as well as general chemistry 1 and 2, collegiate level. We're going to take it up a notch, and that's part of my education outreach that I'm doing for open education resources. I will be incorporating virtual labs that you can do at home that are free and for you to play around with and learn a little bit of science. All right, so thank you for being here. Thank you again to Jen's Little Corner for hopping in, as well as Microraptor and Sinister Porpoise for hopping in and sharing a bit more insight and information on things. And I'll end it with this. You always make each day special for me. You know how? By just your being you. See you next time. Bye!